All right, super. I think live stream should have just started. Waiting to confirm from YouTube. There's usually a delay. Let's see, just make sure all my links are. Here we go. Okay, welcome. So tonight's going to be a little bit different of a format than the previous human rights panel discussions. Rather than recruit a specific list of panelists, this time I've decided to just kind of make it an open mic kind of a thing. And I can send anybody who's participating the chat link to the Zoom. If you're tuning in from Facebook or wherever, just go ahead and drop me a message and I can get you in. But tonight's topic is basically finance and how governments manipulate the economy to deny people their rights. And this is a huge topic. It's very vast in its implications, and I think we're honestly we're very coddled as a society, at least here in the West, in the United States of America, for the very most part, because we've been taught in our public schools and our taxpayer-funded schools for a very long time that the government has all sorts of powers to regulate the economy, regulate interstate commerce, right? So the Commerce Clause from the Constitution, and to basically wave their magic wand and whatever they say goes, as far as allocating funds for a project or saying thou shalt, and thou shalt not. Several years ago, my wife and I, just as an example, we were students on a college campus, and we wanted to be able to provide fellow students, with a very economical, cheap, just very nourishing and filling breakfast option. We wanted to give them an option to have like hot cracked wheat cereal. Very Spartan, but the one of the huge benefits is it's very cheap. It's very easy and quick to prepare. You can do so in bulk, and you can add all kinds of toppings and stuff. You can have little, corner stand and stuff. And just doing the research on this, there were so many regulatory hurdles and hoops that you had to jump through just to be able to get a business license to be able to do this. To the tune of you'd have to have like $10,000 minimum in cash in upfront costs just sitting around. And as students, we didn't have that kind of money. We had a kitchen, we had sufficient infrastructure and goods on hand to be able to begin supplying this. Of course, there's also the regulatory difference of like, is it hot food versus cold food? And anyways, the legislature is still coming up with all kinds of new weird requirements and regulations around what you are and aren't allowed to serve people as food, and what kind of licensing requirements there are, and what kind of permitting and inspections and all that. And I understand that there's a concern for people's safety, but frankly, if people lack knowledge themselves, then that's one of the huge problems, right? Is the less knowledge we have, the more we tend to outsource things to government, because we don't actually understand that, like, yes, this is a bowl of hot wheat cereal, and it has nuts in it, it has almond or whatever, it has coconut shavings, whatever toppings you want, right? Yes, it has honey, right? And so just the fact of making disclosures to people and obtaining, I don't know if informed consent is the right word. I kind of hate that term. Uh, by the way it's been used. Anyways, just making sure that people are informed about their purchasing choices and so on. The government's taken so much of that burden, if you will, upon itself, but is in fact actually ultimately burdening the producers as well as the consumers, because they have to pay for that's included in the costs of running a business, and the business has to charge more because they need to be profitable, and they've sunk all this money just into meeting these regulatory requirements, when really the most important clause, in my opinion, in managing a business and finances and so on, as far as it pertains to the government, is that the Congress shall so it's Section 10, Article 1, Section 10. Yes, here it is. No state shall pass any law impairing the obligation of contracts. Yeah. So any law, it's Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. And I love that because you are freely allowed to enter into contracts with other people. If somebody wants to like start a business or something like that, you have the freedom to do so. You don't need to have some big government hovering over you. And I understand people have all kinds of complaints and requirements and fears, frankly, that are inculcated through their government schools and through the media because, oh, but what if somebody gets food poisoning at this restaurant? It's like, yeah, then there is a serious liability issue. I understand. I understand that there's a need for caution. But if you, the consumer, have a concern about this food might be poisoned, then like maybe don't buy there, and maybe, yeah, do go ahead and look into the reputability of the restaurant. You can personally examine the way that they prepare the food, or you could even commission a private investigator or something like that, or get a private certification. I'm not saying that everything in the whole world has to be privatized, but just out of the gate, the very notion that the Commerce Clause, this is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, to regulate commerce. Uh, just the very fact that that clause exists doesn't mean that the government gets to do whatever they want. Regulate means to make regular. An example of regulating a field or a trade might be, for example, assigning weights and measures. This is something you even see in the Book of Mormon. It's like, this is what a measure of barley is. This is the weight. This is how you transact that. It's not that the government's getting in and being able to be like, oh, anytime we're going to make up a rule that anytime you grow this kind of crop, you have to give this much of it to us, or you have to throw that much away, or you have to prepare it in this way. Exactly. It's like uh, a lot of people have common sense as long as they are not moved upon by an external motive for selfish gain, which I get that there's a temptation for all people towards selfishness, which is one of the primary reasons why governments exist in the first place. Is that if you do have a grievance and you can say, hey, this person, maliciously did this to me, or this person unjustly, unfairly did such and such, then you have an actual law. There are criminal laws that say, you shall not defraud, you shall not steal, etc. And then you can hold them criminally liable, or you can sue them civilly if the allegation is that they were just unfair with you, right? And so one of the problems with modern finance and economic management on the part of governments is that we have a huge amount of burden that has been shifted away from the courts and from private contracts and agreements and settlements between individuals and onto the legislative system, where the legislators feel like it's their job, it's their duty to go and like meticulously analyze every conceivable thing that could go wrong or that anybody could possibly find fault with, and then like go and craft a specific bit of legislation on that point just to prove that they're smart, prove that they're wise, prove that they're good stewards and whatever. When in fact they're making people's lives miserable 9 times out of 10 with the regulations they pass. And anyways, I could maybe come up with some examples today, but so I just for context, where I'm coming from right now, my headspace is I just attended the most recent legislative committee hearings here in the state of Utah, and I went to testify in several of those. Honestly, my approach was, well, I'm really concerned about several bills that I had been made aware of that are big power grabs, and so I went to testify specifically on those. And while I was there, I looked at some of the others, and I was like, oh wow, these are laced with poison pills too. Somebody needs to get up and say something about it, so I did. And anyway, yeah, there, all this legislation, it's so packed with poison pills. And maybe if you follow me on Facebook or whatever, you could get a taste for that. But I've also been preparing some videos to discuss several of those items on this channel as well. There was one in particular. I don't know if I'll be able to find the link to it because I was trying to keep an eye on, like, there were multiple different legislative sessions happening concurrently all at the same time. But there was one that was like, micro kitchen legislation for businesses, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't even go and weigh in on that one in particular because there were others that looked more urgent to go and testify on, but that was one that was on their docket. Let me see if I can pull it up here. But anyways, I'm not seeing it at the moment. But yeah, this is the kind of thing, they come up with these kind of weird hyper regulatory, just all these rules, all this rulemaking around these things, and that's one of the problems. But yeah, I was hoping tonight that we could go at least into some detail on. Let me just lay out some of the some of the issues that I've been paying attention to. One is of course we have Doge going through, and again, this is not intended to be a politicized live stream. This is about human rights, and so I'm going to keep everything in that context. Is the intent here? Um, but if you've been on X, for example, Elon Musk's Twitter, formerly Twitter platform, um, he's just posting incessantly on this whole Doge thing. Let me go ahead and just, I don't know, pull it up and scroll through it for a moment so you have an idea, a feel for what that's like, even if you don't ordinarily inhabit the realm that is the Twitterverse. Go ahead and share that. Boom. Okay. So you should be able to see this, I hope. Um, but yeah, he's just, yeah, he posts a lot about, okay, paycheck protection program. Yeah, so he reposts Department of Government Efficiency, that account, quite a bit. And they claim to be finding all these major items of fraud and waste and stuff in the government. Oh, we're saving you this many dollars, that many dollars. And a lot of this really is shock and awe tactics. And like, this is probably one of the biggest points of falling out that I've had, honestly, with my conservative friends, because I'm actually ultra conservative, if you will. I don't think I've ever met anybody out in the wild who is more conservative than I am, and yet I and maybe this is part of the reason, is because if your perception of things is that the world as it was when you were attending public school is the world as it should be, for the most part anyway. If that's your perception of things, which by default it usually is, that's kind of what conservatism is. That's the mindset that it is, that it expresses, is that I want to conserve things as they were when I was young. Liberalism is more like, I want to change things as they were and as they are, that I'm familiar with. I'd rather break the status quo. Conservatism is, I would rather retain the status quo, right? And so it's not terribly meaningful as a value system, to be honest. It's just a bias that's like placed differently in time, which is one reason why, if you'll pardon my language here, this is not intended as offensive terminology. It's just conservatism is just generationally delayed liberalism, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. Sorry, the reason why I mention that is because when people come and just kind of unload on me and be like, "Oh yeah, Doge is so awesome. They're finding all this fraud and stuff," and I'm like, and they show me these like big shocking numbers and stuff, $105 billion of estimated savings, from Doge, and I'm like, okay. I'm like almost completely unfazed by that. And a lot of people are puzzled by that. And they're like, oh, that must mean you're a flaming leftist and stuff. And I'm like, again, I want to depoliticize the conversation around this. Don't make it about where you think you are on this alleged, I believe, mythical political spectrum. Let's make it about principles. And the way we can frame the conversation of, fiscal responsibility and government and economics and how that pertains to human rights is, I believe, just by recognizing things as they really are, not by the way that we were told to believe them in these, again, follow the money, right? Taxpayer funded schools, right? So if we want to understand the roots and causes of, financial depredations, then we need to understand the principles. So here's the reason, in a nutshell, why Doge's stuff doesn't really, like, it doesn't even raise an eyebrow for me, honestly, is because I already knew, it's going to sound arrogant, but it's not. This is me being truthful. I already knew that the government was at least this corrupt. And so, in fact, here's one of the particular reasons why I'm unfazed, is the fact that I know that the government is well over 10 times this corrupt, including when it comes to these financial quantities that they claim to be exposing. So if at the end of the day, this Department of Government Efficiency comes back and says, wow, we had a really good run. We did such a good job. We saved taxpayers, I don't know, by the end of the year, $500 billion. I'd be like, okay. Like, I'm not a big fan of Doge. And it's not because I don't believe in putting a stop to corruption. It's because they aren't telling us the whole story. They aren't even telling us a 10th part, or perhaps even 100th part of the whole story. And so, like, this is one reason why I'm not out there watching you know, Trump's message to Congress right now. It's because I expect to get a very filtered 1% kind of tunnel vision view of things. And it is informative in the sense that that's the angle that that particular, partisan objective wants you to see. The people who manage those expectations of those partisans, that's what they want you to see. And this is the way media have always operated, both left and right. And I have to admit that to some extent, this is kind of a revelation for me. It's kind of a big understanding that I've had that the parties aren't very different in that respect. And again, I promised I would try to make this as nonpartisan as possible. But it's like once you realize that, once you realize you're getting a very filtered view of things, it's possible to begin to have dialogue with people on nonpartisan terms that are actually principled, as opposed to what, you don't like Trump, you must be the devil, you must be a leftist. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't think that way anymore. I don't, and actually, I'm not sorry about it because it's very liberating. It's not me being stupid. I don't have a leftist brainworm. I'm not woke. It's just me being real. Because here's part of the problem. Okay, $105 billion. I'm like, okay, so what? So what? What are our unfunded liabilities right now? Estimates vary, but it's like, what is it, $135 trillion to 200 some odd trillion? Undisclosed quantities, right? Those are our unfunded liabilities right now. And so like plus our debt, debt clock was, what was that, 35 trillion? I forget. But you look at this and it's like, oh wow, like less than a third of a percent, like less than one third of 1%. I'm like, and even if all of this were, and I'm not trying to throw shade on Doge or the people who work there or anything like that. I'm just saying, even if all of this were just rigorously true, that like this does indeed factually equate to exactly $155 billion in taxpayer savings, amount saved per taxpayer $652. I mean, our government's blown way more than that on irresponsible and globalistic projects, and we're never going to see that money again. It's never coming back, right? So this idea that they're like, yeah, we're gonna save the taxpayer. I'm like, I'm sorry, but like $700 as like a one-time payment or whatever, or even a 5,000 Doge dividend. I'm sorry, but that just doesn't bring down my mortgage payment to what it would have been if I had bought 2 years earlier. Or for those who are renting, that's not going to bring your rates lower. In fact, if anything, that's likely to bring up your rates higher. Because as I testified in one of the bills in the House committee hearings today, in the state of Utah, these legislators were entertaining the possibility of going and injecting taxpayer funds through loan subsidies into the housing market, and they called it an affordable housing bill. And I raised my hand and I said, hey, you know that whenever you pump public money into a private market, the public money competes with the private money and it drives costs up. And you all know this. You all know this. And I just laid it out. I said, that's socialism. Guys, like we shouldn't put lipstick on a pig. That's socialism. And immediately they're just, okay. They shrug it off and then immediately, okay, let's pass it. No discussion, nothing. And I'm just like, right, you guys are telling me exactly who you are. And I do feel very passionately about this, obviously, and it's not just my feelings. These are objective facts, and every single one of us will be judged by God in the day of judgment for how we hold these principles. Because if we think it's okay, whether we're conservatives, liberals, I don't care. I don't care. If you personally, individually, think that it's okay for you to abet or just sit still while your government installs this program that's going to take money away from people and then give it to whomever they please, that's income redistribution, that's theft. That's not authorized under the Constitution, and you are complicit. And I understand it's like, no one likes to do the dirty work, right? Because if you call it what it is, and if you see it for what it is, it's a lot more gory. It's kind of like if you ever saw Dinesh D'Souza's film, I don't know if you're right wing, left wing, whatever. I saw some of his films. He made some really great points, I think, about the mafia, the Chicago mafia. They would hire hitmen. Why? Because who was it? Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky. No, it was Saul Alinsky talking about and to his name is escaping me right now. Al Capone's right hand man, Frank Nitti. Frank Nitti. He would hire people from out of state or from a different town to be hitmen, and the reason why he would do that is because he said, well, you don't want to hire a guy to go murder his neighbor. You don't want to be that heartless. It should be somebody who doesn't know him. And there's a really nefarious principle there, which is basically that if you enact violence on others, even if it's through, you know, a violence laundering operation to make it look clean, make it look like it's law and order, but it's still violence, it's still theft, uh, then you are every bit as complicit, every bit as guilty as though you had committed that injury yourself. And so, yeah, we've discovered yet another form of laundering, force laundering. And, the libertarians love this concept because they're like, I've heard so many people be like, Stefan Molyneux, he's an example. He's an anarcho-capitalist. He favors anarchy as his preferred flavor of government. I understand there are a lot of different nuances and stuff that people put under these kinds of labels and so on. So pardon if I get anything wrong here, but the basic precept there is, no use of force. Governments shouldn't ever use force. They practically shouldn't exist for the very most part, or perhaps at all. Um, and there are legitimate uses of force, though, and the legitimate use of force, of course, is as a police force to protect people's rights, not to confer special benefits on some potentates. Whoever happens to have the power shouldn't get more privileges than other people, more benefits, whatever. People should be free. People should be able to exercise their rights, and whenever a person's injured, that's when the law enforcement should intervene. Anyway, sorry, all of which is to kind of come out and say, like, if you're using the government as your instrument to confiscate money from other people and give it to your special interests, you are complicit in theft. Should not be controversial at all. And if you want to say the libertarians are right about this, go ahead and say that. But my position, of course, is not that all taxation is theft. I'm not a taxation is theft person. You'll see my background is not taxation is theft. I will never support that because I don't believe that. I don't believe that taxation is inherently theft. But there are many forms of redistribution and confiscation that are theft. And the difference maker is really, is it constitutional or is it not? Did we consent to it or not? No taxation without representation. If you have representation, taxation can be fine. But that representation actually has to be robust. The legislators, the policymakers, actually have to be responsive to people. And if they're not responsive to the people, then you are not being represented. And what they do with your money is probably whatever they want. And that's when you get into a lot of problems here. Anyway, so yeah, just why do I not bat an eyebrow at this? Because $105 billion, that is chump change. That is literally just chump change compared to all of the injuries that, frankly, our own government has sustained against us, right? And that many people have very awkwardly just gone right along with. And I understand there are a lot of people who, if they understood cause and effect, they would stand up right now and be like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Like, we should stop this bill specifically. And a lot of you are probably cynical. Like, I suppose I probably should be by now because I just had the experience of going and telling my representatives and senators no on a lot of things that were really cut and dry, very obvious, and they just railroaded me. And I understand that feeling. At the same time, I would submit that if you are on the sidelines right now, or if you think that standing up to theft and other intrusions against people's rights, if you think that's not a big deal or something that's just totally hopeless, let me put it this way. I do it for my own benefit, frankly. Selfish as that may sound. The reason why I would speak up to somebody who I, already have calculated, there's like not a chance in a million that this person will even repent or listen. It's so that I can have expressed it. I can have told them no. I can have stood up for what is right. And yeah, again, you could call that selfish or just foolish or misguided, waste of time or whatever. The truth is, if enough of us do that and don't give up on that, then that probability actually changes. Because, okay, let's say that a representative represents 1 million people, and I'm one of those 1 million people, and I go heckle him and I give him a hard time. It's very easy for them to write off one person. Because if you have any experience with this, you probably know there's pretty much always that one crazy person who's just like, oh yeah, they're sorry, I don't want to make anyone sound crazy, so I'm not going to cite an issue that I perceive culturally as crazy or whatever. But you could have people who are maybe legitimately insane or whatever, or just misguided or whatever, and they come up and they have their ideas. That's one of the indicators people use is, are you alone? Are you the only person who's saying this? And if you're the only person who's saying this, then, uh, King Noah and his priests, it's like, oh, we're going to disregard you, right? Which is one reason why it's vitally important to have an Alma. If you're not familiar with the Book of Mormon, Alma is a wicked priest of this king who had all these harlots and everything, and this prophet Abinadi shows up and says, hey, you're not keeping God's commandments. And they're all mocking him and saying he's crazy and stuff. And then one of the priests, Alma, he is smitten to his core. He knows that what Abinadi told him is true, and he stands up and he says, don't hurt this man. He has told you the truth. And immediately when he says this, the king orders him killed. And so he has to flee and, get out of there for his life. But it is extremely valuable when more than one witness shows up to testify that something is true. And so if you know that 2 + 2 = 4, this is why I started doing this. This is one of the major reasons why I started doing this channel altogether is because I'll say it's at least 2 reasons. One is that I have been given a lot of really wonderful things by our Heavenly Father. I've been given things that I cannot help but share. And you might disagree with my opinions on a lot of things, and that's probably fine. I don't blame people for not believing me. But when I have something that's good, I want to share it. However unique, however exquisite it might be, And that's one of the reasons why I care about the Lord's holidays. So that's been one of the major emphases of this channel. But also, increasingly, I've realized I am very late here, very late to the party, and I apologize for that. But there is an enormous need in the world right now for people who are willing to stand up and simply say that 2 + 2 = 4. This has been what the prophets have been doing for a long, long time. And many people, including members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, thought the prophets were crazy when they came out with the proclamation on the family now 30 years ago. Oh, that's crazy. That's how you don't need to say that. Everybody knows that. But increasingly, I've come to realize that the adversary has been poisoning our minds to the point where I can't take for granted that, my best friend from 10 years ago still knows all of the same things today that he knew back then. I can't take for granted that I know all of those same things. Because Satan is so relentless in trying to get us to forget what we know. And if we forget what we know, knowledge of truth is like a plant. If you forget to water it, if you neglect it, you can come back to it in a week, a month, a year, and it's gone. It's dead. It's withered. Or it's so close to perishing. You actually have to nourish it. Knowledge of truth, testimony, is a living thing. It does not have an infinite shelf life. It has to be exercised. It has to be nourished, or else it will die. And this might sound very scary to you. You're like, oh, I can't pay that price. It's like, well, yeah, you can. Of course you can. I mean, imagine it's just you in this one room. And this one room fits all the things that you care about for eternity, right? You might not be able to take them physically with you, but let's say they represent, metaphorically speaking, the things that you can take with you. Like your friendships, the way you treat people, your knowledge, your love, your willingness to sacrifice, for certain ideals. Those are the things you can actually take with you. And if you're not willing to take the time of day to care for them, then they will wither and die. So that's a large part of why I'm doing this, is I want us to understand these very basic principles that they're timeless, right? So this is one of the reasons at the end of this live stream, I will be revealing some figures, by the way, some estimates, and they're only estimates, but they're somewhat researched estimates as to how much money our own government in the United States of America has cost us, the American people, over the years, through, shall we say, nefarious and unlawful, illegitimate means, and when I say unlawful, just to be clear here, I'm not talking about things that are necessarily illegal. A friend pointed out, yes, there are differences, distinctions to be made between legal and lawful, and I won't claim to be an expert on that subject, but here's the gist. The gist of it is touted at least to be something is legal if a governing body, representatives, legislature, Congress, whatever, makes rules, makes laws stating that they are allowed. That's legal, right? Whereas lawful is something more permanent. That is, it corresponds to or is compatible with moral law, eternal law, or the supreme law of the land. That is the Constitution. And so you can have things that are legal but unlawful, if you will. That is to say, a ruler or a governing body says they're okay, when in reality they're not okay. And so when I speak of things being unlawful, theft is unlawful, and no matter if it's legal, there are many forms of legal theft. Like, this is something we should realize. Our laws, the laws of our potentates, of the governing bodies among us, Congress, like, there are swamps of unconstitutional laws. And this is not me being some conspiracy alarmist here. This is me just looking at the actual principles and the text of the Constitution with its fixed meaning, and contrasting and comparing that with what we actually do and have, written into the law books today. It's egregiously different. And a person who doesn't recognize this, a person who thinks, oh yeah, the Constitution's like 97% intact, he's not going to get this. Like, this is, maybe work with them. I would ask that person, if you're that person, if you know that person, ask the question, what's that 3%? Let's talk about that, because that's common ground. And to be fair, there could be common ground on the other side of things too, to say, like, yeah, I still have significant freedom of speech today. It's not what it should be. I don't have full freedom of speech protected by the Constitution, because there have been some of those protections that have been removed and reduced. But it's not just a binary. Very few of our rights are just binary, because anyway, we could give lots and lots of examples, but we could say maybe one fictitious example, hopefully fictitious, is that a government runs a lottery each year and 1% of the population is just going to be euthanized. Is that respecting people's right to life? Well, for the surviving 99% each year, they might argue, yes, the government respects my right to life. But what about the 1% who got bumped off? And so you see, this is one reason why we really have to care about minorities, because the people who are silenced. And I'm not saying that you have to be an LGBTQ activist. I'm not. I never will be, frankly, because I don't believe in perversion. But I will stand up for people's actual rights as human beings. We don't have the right to take away other people's lives just because we disagree with them, And so, or you can marginalize them. But this happens so often that because we're not in that sliver, that the powers that be are taking off. That we don't have any nerves in that. We don't have any skin in the game, we think, until the knife catches up to us, and then we feel it. But then it's too late. So this is why it's important to speak up about these things. And this is very real. So even something that is inflicted on a fraction of the populace that infringes their rights, that is an infringement on your rights too, because the government doesn't. It wouldn't discriminate if you fell into that demographic, that category, you'd be persecuted equally with them. So let your feelings towards your brothers and sisters be identical to your feelings towards yourself. And if you do that, I think you'll be very well equipped to understand injuries against human rights and the remedies for them much, much better than you are today. I'm not saying you don't have those feelings, but as we pursue that, we'll get better and better at this. We'll get better and better at having compassion and identifying the principles, because financial extortion, theft, and horrible fiscal policy has affected very, very negatively the lives of millions of our brothers and sisters. And most of the time, we don't feel that as directly, and therefore we just sit still because we're like, well, I'm still okay. I'm still able to make my rent payments and stuff, and I can't complain. I've got bread and circuses to tide me over. So, anyways, yeah, just on the Doge issue, 105 billion. Let's remember that ballpark number. $100 billion could be 500 billion by the end of the year. Who knows? We'll give them the benefit of the doubt there. But I hope throughout the course of this you'll kind of see why that doesn't even faze me, right? So let's talk about the real figures, real statistics. There are some other things that I think would be interesting for us to look at, other figures. Not least of which is Social Security and Medicare. There are a lot of people who are sticking up for Social Security and Medicare right now. Let me just put it this way. The way I see. Okay, all right. Sorry, I'm threatening to make a politicized statement here. I'll go ahead and make it. So Doge is kind of like a kid who's whacking pinatas. All these government corruption programs and agencies and stuff, all these abuses of funds and so on. They're basically like pinatas that have been set up there for this kid to go and whack and get money out of, and consolidate power. And that's basically the way that Doge and Elon Musk have been operating with these things. And that's one of the major causes of my concern here is, and Trump has stated this numerous times. He said things like, I don't disagree with U.S. aid in principle. I just disagree with the way it was done. Part of the reason, again, why I'm like, I don't agree with what the administration is doing is because I disagree with U.S. aid categorically. I disagree with money laundering categorically. I say if we're going to deliver foreign aid, then it needs to be completely above board. I say if we're going to, and it has to be pursuant to an actual treaty obligation that's constitutionally sound. So you have to actually pass all of those tests, and it has to be already audited, and the expenditures have to be published by Congress. That's a requirement. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 says that's the responsibility of Congress. They have to actually deliver the budgetary receipts on a regular basis. So yeah, secret spending by our government, that's horrifying. Yes, I agree. Problem is only telling us like 10% or less of it. So yeah, that's a major cause for concern. Social Security, I was bringing up some figures on that. I'm looking up the annual revenue of Social Security. So something a lot of people don't realize about Social Security is you look at your pay stubs and you will see that your Social Security withholding amount is something to the tune of, I'm trying to remember, it's like 6.25%. Let me look that up. Social Security percentage. Yes, so 6.2% is the official tax rate for both employees and employers. And that's really important, by the way, because most employees don't realize this, that the federal government skims off 6.2% of your gross pay before it's even accounted as your gross pay. So maybe we can work through an example here. This is something they never taught you in school, um, not in government schools anyway. They avoid these topics like the plague. So if you are making $100,000 a year, then yeah, you pay $6,200 into Social Security every year. And I'm sure, no matter who you are, $6,200 a year sounds like a pretty good chunk of cheddar, you know? But what you might not realize is that it's actually twice that. It's actually twice that. It would be $12,400 because what your employer actually has to set aside an extra $6,200 just to be able to employ you because they pay pre-payroll taxes on Social Security of an equivalent amount. This is one of the ways that our government has been deceiving us. It is a deliberately deceptive, dishonest practice, and I won't hesitate to tell you or anyone else that those kinds of practices will land people who do not repent of them in hell. This is why hell exists. It's because you are being stolen from, you are being lied to, you are being cheated, and the people who do it are going to hell. Just to be very, very blunt about that. The scriptures inform us of these things in no uncertain terms. It's not a complicated, and it certainly shouldn't be a controversial topic, that if your government is lying to you about the actual amount that you are paying in taxes, that's just fraudulent. It is pure fraud. And so even though we've gotten used to it, that doesn't mean it's okay. Even though it's legal, that doesn't mean it's not theft. So money that they're taking and not telling you about, regardless of what it's earmarked for, I believe definitely, qualifies as theft. Anyways, so there's a simple example of if your annual salary is $100,000, the government's actually taking $12,400 every year from you for Social Security, and Social Security is a big scam because the government doesn't actually have authority to take away your money and put it into a savings or retirement account, so even if it's supposedly on your behalf, because that limits your flexibility with your money. If you could use that towards your towards a mortgage payment, for example, towards a down payment, towards medical bills, that could mean the difference actually between living and dying. Like this is how serious it gets. This is one of the reasons why I feel very passionately about property rights as a very significant and important component of human rights, because all people require property in order to live. I'm going to pull up the annual revenue for Social Security in just a moment, but I just want to help us envision this. Just imagine that you live in a world where you have no recognized property rights. You will starve. You will starve, and you will die from dehydration or exposure or sickness, and you will die within the next few days or weeks at the very most. And this is because in order for you to consume something, it has to be your private, personal property. The moment a cheeseburger goes into your mouth, sorry Lenin, sorry Marx, sorry Stalin, this is my food. Sorry, but not sorry. No matter how idealistic a notion you have of welfare and communism and it's all going to be great, like the actual hard, material, concrete, mathematical facts in the real physical world are that you require sustenance in order to survive. And this necessitates that what goes into your body, which gets assimilated and much of it becomes a part of you, has to be your own personal, private property that no one can take away. Because if you live under this theory of communal ownership, that what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours, try that out at the family dinner table. Actually, don't. You'll find that it ends in contention. Because if you say, well, what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine, the moment your sibling starts, you're eating that French fry. No, you're not. And you're just going to fight over everything because you can't actually agree that any human being is actually worthy to have something for himself. This is one of the huge differences between so-called capitalism and communism. Capitalism is a Marxist term. Karl Marx coined the term in order to paint his ideological opponents as greedy and so on. But the simple recipe here is we need to have private property rights, and they need to be protected. They need to be held sacred. And one of the very clear and obvious reasons for that is even if your people in government, and even if you yourself, your neighbors, whoever, no matter who believes it, if you believe that it's okay for the government to be like, oh yeah, 12.4% of your income, you don't really need that. We'll just hang on to that for you until you're 65 years old, and then we'll give like some of it back, maybe. Because that's planning for the future. That's financial responsibility, you know? And in the meantime, not only are they taking that 12.4% away, but they're also taking, what is it, another 1.65%, I believe, for Medicare taxes and so on. Times two, again, sorry, 1.45% total. They're just taking away from you, and they're lying to you about how much they're taking away, lying by concealing the information from you deliberately, and then it's death by 1,000 cuts, because you also got to pay your auto, automobile registration renewal. You got to pay $1,000 or more a year in car insurance for each vehicle. Oh, and you've got dental bills, you've got medical bills, you've got grocery bills, you've got your mortgage, and before you know it, you're like looking at, okay, I have like $50 a month of disposable. Wait, not anymore because we had some unexpected expense, and just a little bit. We live on thin margins in our society. So many people are in debt, despite all the illusions of prosperity. We have relative prosperity simply because, yeah, we might live in comfortable homes, and sometimes comfortable anyway. We have electricity. Oh, look at that. We have internet. Oh, look, we have entertainment. So therefore, we can distract ourselves from the reality that we have like no savings. We can distract ourselves because of all the cheap food and stuff that we're doing well. We're doing great, and frankly, a lot of us do feel like we're doing pretty well if we have like no debt, beyond a mortgage anyway, and can afford to eat. We're doing pretty well, and even if we're living paycheck to paycheck, like that's you're doing better than actually a huge number of Americans. And this is something that, again, not politicizing here, like Donald Trump or Joe Biden are probably not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you what percentage of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck unless it's like trying to fault the other guy, So, let's be real about our circumstances. Let's be real about our suffering. And let's be real about the margins we live on, which are often vanishingly small. And to be fair, like some of that is due to a fair part. Be fair to yourself. Like if you have bad spending habits, stop it. If you're eating out too much, stop it. If you're not going to make it, if you don't have savings, stop it. Like maneuver. Use what latitude you do have. And I know it's super easy for me or for any of us just to go and scapegoat the government and say, oh, it's all the government's fault. Part of the reason why I'm talking, right? Part of the reason why we're having this discussion is because maybe it's not all the government's fault. Maybe we have a part of that too. And maybe part of that is the fact that we've been letting our government get away with that, right? Because we think it's okay to steal from other people for our own benefit, or for the benefit of, or because we just got used to it, Anyways, so this is part of the problem is that finances, property, they do come down to matters of life and death more often than we would like to admit. There are times when the government says, oh, we got to raise your taxes by $300 a year because we got to go fund this war in Iraq. And you're like, you roll your eyes and you're like, oh man, there's a PlayStation I won't be able to afford, but I'll live. And there are people who don't afford the PlayStations consequently, and they live. Or maybe they spend the money on the PlayStation and just go without food for a while, right? Or just don't have as much in savings, right? So there are some people who have a buffer, but let's be honest, there are a lot of people who don't. Let's be honest, there are situations in almost anyone's life. Everyone except the cradle to grave people with the silver spoon in their mouth. There will always be times when things are tight, and you need that flexibility. You need that freedom, dare I say, freedom, liberty. This is a vital right. And when you confiscate people's property willy-nilly, you are in fact constraining their liberty, their freedoms. And if you constrain their liberty at an inopportune time, you could in fact be prematurely ending their lives. So let's not pretend that, like, death by a thousand cuts financially is okay, because it's still death in the end. The two things that are certain in life, right? Death and taxes, right? They're the same thing, right? In a very real sense. And again, it's not the case that all taxation is theft. All unconstitutional taxation is theft. All dishonest taxation is theft. But and you could also add that all taxation not pursuant to any enumerated power is theft, because that is also factual. It was not consensual. We did not agree to that. But yeah, I hope I'm painting a clear enough picture here, and I'm just kind of honestly reiterating some examples that I know of in my life. Like, I have a neighbor who can hardly afford his car insurance payments. He's not able to get out very much because of his health, and just if he didn't have to pay that $1,000 a year for a vehicle that he rarely uses, once every couple weeks maybe for a grocery trip, that's a really hefty fine for the use of something that, why? Always ask, what's the impact on people? What's the impact on real human beings? Get outside of your own life, your own lifestyle, and learn what life is like for other people. Remember what life was like for you during your hard times, and remember, like, hey, wow, if only I didn't have those payroll deductions for this mythical Social Security or Medicare or stuff. Like, we shouldn't be forced into socialism. It's evil. It's despicable. It's wicked. And yes, I have no doubt that a lot of people, given that extra gravy, would use it unwisely. But the great thing there, the brilliant thing there, is they would actually be exposed to the consequences of their own choices. And that is inherent in the nature of freedom. If you aren't allowed to be exposed to the consequences of your own choices, then you are breeding a situation where people desire to be unaccountable, and where they willingly make poor choices because they assume someone else is going to pick up the slack. It would be better to train ourselves to make good choices by facing the consequences of our own choices, rather than being insulated from them and making someone else pay the bill. You see what I'm saying? Because there's no charity in that. There's no justice in that. And if somebody is forced to pay X amount, to cover someone else's folly, then it's like, well, I really needed that. There are hinge points in our lives. There are opportunities that never come back. And if we are financially stretched so thin, we can't even take advantage of our opportunities. That's life shattering. And don't lecture me that, oh well, it's just luck of the draw, or just, you just got to deal with it because, time and chance happeneth to them all. I get time and chance happeneth to them all, but an opportunity never comes again. Yeah, there are opportunities today. They're not all the same as yesterday's opportunities. And, if you're constraining people's liberty willingly, again, human rights, if you're taking away freedom from people, stealing it, how can you be justified in the day of judgment? How can you be okay with that? I honestly can't fathom that. And this is, again, why I'm saying 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 = 4. So, yeah, like, the guy who can't afford his medications because he's paying auto insurance, overpaying, even if he wanted to buy auto insurance, which he shouldn't be required to. Who's looking out for him? Who's going to help him? It's all these lies, all these. Socialism is a myth. They're selling you lies. This idea that lives can be better if we, the government, are allowed to steal from other people on your behalf, right? Because guess what? They're stealing from you too. Anyways, so like I hope some of these, like, real numbers and just kind of getting into the weeds of some of that really helps. There have been times when, somebody's not had the $200 to go and get some preventive treatment, and end up dying, like a year or 5 years later, dying a premature death because they couldn't afford to go and get a diagnostic, or because they couldn't get a screening. They couldn't afford the time off work. Like, there are literally people who are dying because of our fiscal policies, because of the bill, like I saw get recommended favorably from the House of Representatives in my state to say, oh yeah, the federal government should have latitude to go and give people $20,000 loans for a first-time home purchase, because that sounds great. I know that sounds great, doesn't it? But the problem is, there's so many problems with it. It's usury. It's I hope we're making sense here. Some of these financial concepts might be foreign to some people. I've got another video in the works on Aristotle that I need to edit and finally push out. But as he goes over the attributes of money and so on. But like, I'm just trying to talk sense here, and say what's real. Um, so yeah, that's one of the major issues we have to deal with, and one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it, because people do die if they don't get treatment, if they don't get care, and we should not be so deluded as to think that therefore, like it's like the easiest non-solution in the whole world, socialism. I guess you kind of knew coming into this that like this whole thing would be about socialism. Excuse me, and that's, you could say, an accident, except that socialism is theft, right? It's the lie that you have problems, therefore stealing from others will make them better. No, they won't. Um, and so I'm not trying to paint some perfectionist idea here that if we only had a good government, if we only had true free market uh, government, protections of a free market, not protectionism, and if we only had property rights upheld by our government, then everything would be hunky dory, and no one would ever die of cancer, and no one would ever make a mistake, no one would ever be spendy or greedy or make a miscalculation. I don't believe that at all. Like I believe we would still have plenty of troubles. Yeah, greed would still be a problem. Yeah, capitalists could be greedy. That's a fact. That's a fact. But Satan's way is to say, well, that's a problem, and therefore you need to give up freedom. No, we don't. We need to learn how to manage freedom for ourselves. Maximize the good government. The best government is self-government, right? If we manage ourselves well, we wouldn't need to pay people to go and arrest and detain people for murder or theft or robbery or lying or whatever. We wouldn't need to do that because we'd police ourselves. I believe it's been truthfully said that you don't need you don't need a paid government in heaven because the people govern themselves. And perhaps that's every anarchist's dream, if you will. It's just get rid of all those things. But we do live in a real world where people cause hurt, and we need protections. But the protection that we have hired in our government shouldn't be stealing from us. It just shouldn't. And we should never fall for the lie that our lives will be better by injuring other people. And that's the great test of life. That's the great test of life. So, all right, I said I would pull up the dollar amount that we're paying every year in payroll taxes to Social Security. So let me go ahead and pull that up. This is going to be a nice juicy figure to put on our Doge burger. All right, right here. So Social Security annual revenue. So the United States Social Security Administration, with an estimated 183 million workers in the year 2023, had earnings covered by Social Security and paid $1,233 billion in payroll taxes. Okay, employees pay a 6.2% contribution from earnings up to a maximum of $168,600 in 2024, which the employers match. Okay. Okay, yeah, that's a pretty steep number, wouldn't you think? That says let's see. Yeah, 1,233 billion. Income and outgo, actual deficit. Yeah, so these are Social Security payroll tax contributions. Boom, and that is in billions. Sorry. So we're talking Social Security payroll tax more than $1 trillion. Wow. Okay, and there's the 1233. That's that. The AI got it wrong. That's a 2024 figure, not a 2023. But yeah, we're paying into this fund to the tune of $1 trillion a year. And where's the benefit? Where's the benefit? And a lot of critics of Doge will say, oh, you should be slashing Social Security and Medicare because so many people rely on it. And that's a valid critique, honestly, because if you have paid into something with the promise that you'll get a payout, and there are people who are relying on that, it is in fact a bad idea to just defraud them and lie to them. And I don't know everything that's going on there, I'll admit. But if that were the case, if that is happening, that should stop. Like this should not be controversial. If the government has, if they do have that piggy bank and they say they've promised to pay you back, then they should pay you back without delay. And anyways, but Social Security it's not just the payroll taxes, by the way, that are the big concern here. Because this is one of the reasons why I look at the Doge numbers and I'm just like, okay, because the annual takings for Social Security dwarf that. It's 10 times that. So where are the savings? You know, because I'm not seeing that money, and that meshes with my own personal experience. If they say, "Oh, good taxpayers, we've saved you $600 already, goody, goody, goody," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I still pay like $6,000 a year to Social Security, right? So what gives?" You guys are just like, "Hey, are you giving me a tithe of my Social Security payment back as a one-time thing?" Because that's a horrifyingly bad deal. That's an egregiously bad deal. If we're celebrating that, I'm like, that's a non-starter, guys. That's a non-starter. And I understand tons of nuance, all these different line items, shrimp on treadmills and stuff. I get it. There's a lot of easily mockable stuff, but I want to quantify things. I want to say, what is the actual severity and prevalence? How big of a deal is this? Prioritize them. Prioritize things that way, please. That's what I've been about all along. And anybody who wants to join that conversation, please do. So if you have a lead that is bigger than what I found here, if you have a bigger, bottom of the iceberg that you would like to showcase, please come on and let's have that conversation, because it's I just don't like the characterization of Doge as the good guys because they found a small time, grocery store, convenience store heist. Found a robber there and apprehended him and made him pay back. It's like, okay, guys, good job. Where are the trillions of dollars? Where's the big bank robbery? And they keep on playing to social media and being like, oh, where's the however many $1 billion in Fort Knox and stuff? And I'm like, okay, yeah, go ahead and audit that. If you think if no one's going to stop you, just. Anyways, and again, I'm not abetting any transgression of separation of powers by saying that. I'm saying if they're going to go ahead and do it, if they're going to say we want to do this in the name of transparency or whatever, go ahead and just do it. But let's have the real transparency here. The real transparency entails that we have a right to know where our money is really going to, and if the best our government can do is just to give you a one-time $600 or $5,000 refund even for all the money that our government has stolen over time, I think that's a really, really poor exchange, and it's not even true contrition. It's not real repentance. If they're like, oh yeah, we'll give you back 10% or 1% or whatever. So, all right. So I've gone on this big long tirade against Social Security and Medicare. They are terrible ideas. I don't care what your political leanings are. They are socialism. They are evil. They are despicable, and they eliminate people's real financial freedom and fluidity to be able to address the problems of real life. One more really fun thing that I want to bring up. So we've already found something that's at least 10 times bigger than everything that Doge even claims to have uncovered, and it is a recurring expense on an annual basis, Social Security. And people can argue that, oh, but we're getting money back out of it. Everything we pay in to Social Security, we get back out. Is that true or is that not? And here's where it gets a little bit murky, unfortunately. Let me just look at a couple things here real quick. Let me look at unfunded liabilities, because unfunded liabilities, if you're not familiar with the economic term here, It's a promise that the government has made that it hasn't fulfilled, and has no plan even to raise the revenue. No, it doesn't have the revenue. So they can promise, somebody in government can write a check for $100 billion. We're gonna fund this project. We're gonna build the transatlantic, subway or something like that, and it's going to cost however many $100 billion or $1 trillion or whatever. And no one can actually cash that check because they don't have that cash sitting around. And so what they do is they take out a loan, and the loan is based on the vague promise that we'll pay you back later. And this is a huge problem. If we give our government unlimited power of the purse to be able to take out loans on our behalf, there needs to be massive accountability for that. There needs to be collateral. And what too many Americans don't realize, a fair number do, to their credit, realize this, that we are basically the collateral for those loans. Our lives, our work, our all of our possessions, and our children and our grandchildren, children's children, however many generations, can get signed away in an instant by a bureaucrat or a potentate who has this big checkbook in government and says, yeah, we'll commit $100 billion to this, we'll commit $100 billion to that. And of course, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people are upset about the conflict in Ukraine. I'm not going to go into that right now, but if you are upset about the spending, you should wonder why the United States was involved in provoking that in the first place. But regardless, I understand why people are upset when all these massive checks are being written, but it's the hidden expenses, really, that will get you that are much, much bigger. Anyways, unfunded liabilities here, unfunded obligations is what they call them here. This article claims Medicare and Social Security are responsible for 100% of them, and it claims the total is $73.2 trillion. And of course, interest has to be paid on those loans, which, yeah. Anyways, so when you include the interest payments, sorry, I'm no expert. I don't have all these numbers memorized, but just throwing around numbers like laymen do, right? Let's get a little bit acquainted with this. If the government has pledged 70 some odd $trillion to Medicare and Social Security, just taking that claim at face value, it looks like there are several other sites that claim similar things. Anyways, yeah, and there's another saying, $120 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So the numbers, the figures, the projections vary widely. Part of the upshot here is we don't even know how much our government has pledged. We don't even know what all those interest rates on those loans are. We don't even know how much, how many generations of our progeny and our possessions our government has literally just sold out. And that's frankly terrifying. So unfunded liabilities are certainly part of the picture of financial fraud that is the human rights abuses of the government. I'm not saying, by the way, that governments never have a legitimate reason to contract debts. So, for example, during the American Revolutionary War, the American government did, in fact, incur debts to wage that war and to win against Great Britain. And we won our freedom, and then subsequently we paid those debts back because they were reasonable debts. And, of course, human life is very, very precious, So we should never sign those things away lightly. And yet, for programs that are pure socialism, we've committed, if you look at the annual US GDP, I think it's been in the neighborhood of $22-23 billion annually. So that's all told, absolutely everything, all of our every bit of labor, all the blood, sweat, and tears you have spilled out in this last year. Now multiply that by 3.5, and then you're in the ballpark of our unfunded liabilities through these socialistic programs. That's pretty terrifying. Okay. Shock and awe. Yeah, I am kind of pulling some shock and awe strategies on you right here, because the truth is shocking. The truth is, it's very disturbing. When you realize just how much money our government has been wasting and just how much they've been stealing from us. Okay, drum roll. So I did have a plan to get to the question of inflation. Oh, I did forget a couple of other items that I did have docketed for this discussion cryptocurrency. I'm going to actually jump over to the live chat. Sorry, I have not been monitoring that this entire time so far, uh, but I was going to check that and see. Anyways, yeah, as far as cryptocurrency is concerned, I think I do owe you a few words and on money laundering. Um, so yeah, money laundering in its most general form is that you have money that came from somewhere, uh, probably somewhere that people wouldn't take that money if they knew where it was from, like from a bank robbery or something, and then you put it into some magical piggy bank, and then when it comes out of the piggy bank, nobody knows where it came from, or they think that it came from an honorable source, and therefore they take it. Um, yeah, and the operations in Ukraine have been, flagged as money laundering operations. Obviously, that's not completely true because a lot of it has observably gone towards the defense of the people there. Um, and that is not a blanket pronouncement that all that money is clean. It's not a blanket pronouncement that all of it's dirty. So I think we need to be fine grained when we are discussing clean versus dirty money. And I will submit that Social Security is very much a form of money laundering, as is inflation. So let me go ahead and uh, maybe I'll go ahead and give a quick word on cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a pyramid scheme. That's all you need to know about it. I'll give you another minute on it. Cryptocurrency is it's a speculated asset, right? So people will try to assign a dollar amount to a certain quantity of a coin, whether it be Ethereum, Bitcoin, what have you, meme coin, Dogecoin. Um, the thing that the primary couple of virtues that are touted about cryptocurrencies are that they're decentralized in theory, um, and that they are uh, difficult to produce, and therefore they require like a proof of work usually. That's the most stable and sustainable model, excuse me, for cryptocurrencies because it requires computational work to perform the cryptographic hashing functions. And that's how the blockchain works. So the crypto is built on this blockchain, which is a cryptographic thing that basically you do a bunch of computing to crack hard number factoring problems usually, and that is what basically it's the you have to do a certain amount of computing in order to produce a what's called a hash collision, which is basically guessing the right random factor of a number. And it's a mathematically very hard problem. It's an exponentially difficult problem, and so you can just kind of set the difficulty for whatever kind of computing hardware you have. And this is one of the problems with cryptocurrency, though, is it does rely very heavily on the kind of computing hardware you have available, which means, so I've mined cryptocurrency, I've mined Ethereum before, and it uses GPUs, graphics cards, the same kind that you use for gaming usually. And one of the big issues, the biggest factors in the cost function are not only the cost of your hardware, your equipment, GPUs, which tend to be very, very expensive, but also you have your electricity costs and the productivity of the chip, that you're running, your graphics card, depends very, very heavily on the on how efficient it is, right? So the smaller, I don't know how many are very aware of this, but like microchips, they keep getting smaller and smaller. Like your transistors keep getting smaller and smaller on these microchips, and that's one of the major technological innovations that keeps on occurring on a regular basis. That's why your latest computers are so much faster and more energy efficient. That energy efficiency is key. Because yeah, these smaller transistors, they draw lower current. They can run at lower voltages sometimes. They draw less power, right? And so that means you can get more computing done for less cost in electricity. So you can go into these online calculators and decide, okay, for this GPU and this type of coin and this current, trading price, um, you know, here's how much money I can expect to earn or lose per day on this. Oh, and you got to figure out your electricity costs. If I didn't mention that. So, anyways, you plug all these things into the equation, and basically, if you have cheaper electricity and more efficient computers, then you can win the game of crypto. But one of the problems is that we tend not to have the cheapest electricity in the world here in the United States. Foreign countries often have much cheaper because they have fewer environmental regulations and so on, and lower worker wages and stuff like that. So that means their electricity is cheaper. But also, if you have access to the bleeding edge computers, this is why it's so important to have like NVIDIA's RTX 5090 cards or whatever, as opposed to the 4090 or 3090. It's because those older generations, if you have, this is kind of the rule of thumb, has been for a little while. I won't say there's a rule of thumb, but in my observation while I was in this, if you had a graphics card that was like 2 generations old, that was already like too old to be profitable. You practically couldn't earn money with it. And it kind of depends on what's the speculation price right now, which is one of the reasons why Donald Trump's been trying to push to have a crypto reserve, which is money laundering. That's theft. It's socialism. Just I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna varnish that with it's theft, right? And so same thing if Biden had done it. Like any president who's like, oh, we're gonna have a crypto reserve. Like, dude, that's okay. That's insider trading by the way too, because the person pulling the knobs knows to go and like buy a whole bunch of that asset before they go and turn the policy knob to say, okay, we're going to go tell all the media outlets that we're doing this thing now, and then whoop, there goes your value, and then you can just sell it, and you literally just stole the money of these poor people who believe in that speculation. That's one of the reasons why I call it a pyramid scheme. It fits the definition of a pyramid scheme in every respect. And cryptocurrency, even though it does take work to produce, it does favor countries with fewer environmental regulations and so on, and cheaper access to GPUs, which is one of the reasons why I object to Trump's tariffs and Biden's tariffs, because they both had these GPU tariffs, which made things more expensive for me as a cryptocurrency miner and as an AI researcher. It made the equipment, the computing equipment, so much more expensive if you're an American, as opposed to if you're a foreigner who buys it in the native markets. So that's frankly a sellout. So these are things that like you might need some experience with in order to understand what I'm saying about them. And I don't recommend that you go and buy crypto because it very much is a pyramid scheme. It's a rich man's game. It's not a poor man's game. If you can't afford to lose the money, don't. And it's probably not a great idea anyway. I was going to address the decentralization point of crypto as well. It's not actually decentralized. They claim it's decentralized because you can conduct a transaction because the network it operates peer-to-peer, meaning that you can have a device and another person can have a device and you can say, oh yeah, we can exchange without everyone else's permission. It does still have to get recorded onto the blockchain, so you do have to interact with the network at some point regardless. But you can have it private, supposedly, and decentralized. The problem is it's never, ever, ever going to be decentralized for the following reason. It relies on these bleeding edge computer chips, which are only manufactured in a very few highly specialized, very expensive locations in the world. And you can't, like, the only way that cryptocurrency could become truly decentralized is if everybody had like a bleeding edge, like nanoscale, super, cost competitive computer chip manufacturing setup on their desktop. Like if everybody had those, if those were commoditized where they costed like $500 to $1,000 a pop in today's money, like, and if we had the fluidity to be able to purchase those, right? That's the only possible way that cryptocurrency could actually become decentralized. And it's still not immune because as the moment anybody else comes up with a disruptive new technology that allows them to get like, say, even 20% more compute per unit electricity, or 100% more, like doubling the efficiency or whatever, even these stacked incremental gains, they're going to have a disproportionate share of the compute network, which means they're going to get more and more of the of the reward for mining. They're going to get more and more of the control over the network. And if you can't falsify that someone else is doing that, then your crypto network is always going to be vulnerable. And a lot of crypto enthusiasts will say, oh, I'm just blowing smoke or whatever, and there's a lot of protections built into it, and there's no possible way someone could possibly, get that many GPUs and stuff. Like, yeah, sorry, you don't know. You don't know. There have been foreign countries that have had quite a lot of GPUs that nobody thought they had, that were bleeding edge, designed in the USA. So, anyways, so much for crypto. Crypto's a pyramid scheme, and yeah, using taxpayer dollars to buy up one of those things and invest in that's insider trading. It's money laundering. I mentioned the money laundering. That's particularly relevant for crypto because crypto transactions on a majority of these, I don't know if it's a majority, but on Bitcoin anyway, it's supposed to be anonymous. On a number of these, I believe it's the majority of the true crypto coins. Your transactions are supposed to be anonymous. Of course, the exchanges might know who you are. You have to provide some like login credentials and stuff. The government might know who you are. Whoever sees the money turn up might know who you are. Anyways, so yeah, crypto is not sustainable. It's not the way of the future. Uh, Stay out of it. Dangerous. So let's see. I was going to go into inflation, and then I think I am probably going to wrap up because I'm not getting many audience questions tonight. Picked a bad night, I suppose, because I'm competing with the president of the United States, right? Interesting how that can affect your views, right? All right, so let me go ahead and just show a few things with inflation. Um, well, that's right. I need to check on. I did make a deal with people that if they have guesses as to the total amount of money that the government has stolen from us, since you could go with a number of things. You could say how much money has the government stolen us since day one, like the ratification of the Constitution, if you will, or the Declaration of Independence, if you wanted to go even that far back. Or you could try to answer the question of how much have they stolen since 1913, which is kind of a sort of official date. Um, sort of official because that's when the Federal Reserve began. Um, but I don't know that I'm seeing any takers on that question yet. I think it's a very worthwhile question. So if you have any ideas, if you're watching, if you want to drop it into the chat, maybe I could do a subsequent episode with a reveal of my best estimate of what I think the Federal Reserve and our government have stolen from us since day one. And honestly, one of the challenges is it's rather difficult to compute, but I'll go ahead and tip my hand here and say it's way, 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 way more than $105 billion, that sum that the Doge is claiming to have saved us. So, and that's why I'm having this conversation. Like, I sincerely hope that the people of the United States and the people of the world are not under any uh, delusion that the government has all been hunky dory and benign, or even mostly so, for like more than a century. So there's another really fun event I'm going to put up here for your consideration, and then I suppose we can go and have some fun with the inflation question. Um, Sorry, just checking one more. Nope, no responses there. Okay, so this is the. How many of you know about mandatory gold buyback program, Executive Order 6102? It was on effective May 1st, 1933. This is really gory. This is really grotesque. This is one of those things where, like, yeah, if you did not have trust issues with your government before, you should definitely have trust issues when you see this. It says right here, 1933 mandatory gold buyback. So President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933 issued Executive Order 6102, which it's a lot of executive orders, which required U.S. citizens to turn in most of their gold to the Federal Reserve in exchange for cash. What kind of, pray tell, what kind of cash might that be? Okay, this was part of an effort to stabilize the banking system during the Great Depression. I'm sorry, this is one of those moments in history that just leaves me like speechless. But I really do just like it galvanizes my resolve to just go around all day, every day, shouting from the rooftops that 2 plus 2 equals 4. And that theft is theft, right? Because it's so easy to just be a yes man and sit back, like many do in those, uh, legislative committee meeting and hearings. It's just to say, oh yeah, yeah, these people are professional legislators. They probably know what they're doing. Like that sounds like theft to me, but like the guy's wearing a suit, and we're paying him like $230,000 a year. So he better know what he's doing, and I trust him. Don't you? Like, okay, guys, just how ridiculous can you possibly get? I mean, I understand that they're ridiculous, but how ridiculous are we? That's the question. Okay, sorry, I'm having fun, just making fun here. But what else is there to do that just? Sorry, I'm sorry. I don't know whether to laugh or to cry that this happened. I think I'm gonna cry. Okay. But yeah, citizens had until May 1st, 1933 to turn in their gold. They were paid $20.67 per troy ounce of gold. Okay, I guarantee you, though, those were not real dollars. Sorry, I've got to dry through. Those were not real dollars. So, oh yeah, and look at this. Isn't this gorgeous? The penalties for not turning in gold included a fine of up to $10,000 and or 10 years in prison. Are you kidding me? Can you imagine if they tried to do this today? And this is nearly 100 years ago, by the way. Like, you think the government's corrupt today. It is corrupt. It's very corrupt today. It's more corrupt than it was even back then. But, like, how corrupt do you have to be on these stilts of supposed law and order that go down into these toothpick thin justifications, non-existent justifications. They've vanished into thin air. If you look down, what is the foundation you are standing on as a nation? What is your jurisprudence? Where do you derive your legal authority from? What is your precedent? What do you think is legal? What do you think is lawful? Right? Why I brought those concepts up earlier. Like if you say, oh, it's all fine for the government to cut $20,000 checks for first-time homebuyers, oh, no harm, no foul. We're already full-blown socialist, guys. Like conservatives and liberals alike. Like I want to do a survey here because I don't believe it's everyone in the United States, but I want to like just ask like these binary questions. Be like, is this socialism? You know that meme with the guy with the butterfly. Is this socialism? Like, yes, it is, right? So, anyways, if you believe my propaganda that I'm spewing at you, then you'll certainly believe that this is socialism, and we know that it is. We do know that cutting checks for the people, even if it's supposedly their own money, is socialism. It's redistribution. It's exactly the control that Satan wants over things. So yeah, okay, and just look at the justification here, because okay, if you're one of those people in the committee hearing today, and you're like, oh yeah, I think I want more affordable housing. I'm a first time home buyer. I could sure use $20,000. It's like, yeah, and the cost of the house is going to go up by more than $20,000 because that's a loan that you got to pay back with interest, and so you're actually going to be paying a lot more than that, and other people are going to pay a lot more than that too. So um, nothing's free. Nothing's free. But anyways, yeah, just imagine the government saying, "Hey, got to go up all your gold." Not that people have very much anymore, because I mean, Fort Knox, hello, they already stole it from us, and this is literal theft right here. This right here is literal theft. And people could say, "Oh, but there was just compensation." No, there wasn't. Okay, all right. Let me ridicule this just false justification here, and then we'll go into the next part. I'm being a little bit unhinged tonight because there's no one here to keep me in check. All right, so the order was intended to prevent gold hoarding, which was seen as making the banking crisis worse. Oh no, look at those poor banks, they're not doing well. Therefore, we need to take all your gold away, right? Because you're hoarding, you're hoarding. We don't have enough fluidity for our transactions. Therefore, we need to steal from you. It's like, well, no wonder. People aren't spending because you've tanked the market. And with the market being all tanked, people don't want to let go of what they have. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Saying like, hey, people want to have savings. There's absolutely nothing in the whole universe wrong with having savings. Okay? If you want to save up potatoes, save up grain, whatever, like, you gotta eat potatoes and stuff. But like, there's nothing morally wrong with that. Okay? And the government doesn't have the authority to compel people to buy things. This is, Keynesian economics type of justification here. And this is one of the things you were taught in school is that these economic masterminds had these brilliant ideas about how to make the economy better, and more spending equals better economy, and the government has authority to incentivize spending and even maybe force spending. No, it doesn't. Show me where in the Constitution that's authorized. You cannot. It does not exist. Oh, but the Commerce Clause. No, regulate doesn't mean steal. It never did. Okay, all right. So yeah, all these really, really flimsy justifications, completely bogus. But yeah, let's look at some of this. So was this just compensation? Let's check it out. Okay, Article 1. Let's go to Section 10. no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a legal tender in payment of debts. Okay? How complicated of a concept is this? And I have heard people, um, regardless of political affiliations, say things like, oh, well, it only says that the states can't make anything but gold or silver coin legal. And therefore, the federal government can totally issue things that are not gold or silver coins. It's like, no, no. Like, you need to learn how to reason in real life, real logic. Uh, if no state is allowed to make anything but gold or silver, a tender in payments of debts, then like, how are you going to get the state of Illinois or the state of Florida or the state of Texas to accept anything but gold or silver coins, since they are forbidden by the Constitution to make anything but that illegal tender, right? And so it would be very foolish for them not to have a law that says, yeah, gold and silver we accept, or gold we accept, or but not silver, or silver but not gold. This gives the states that latitude. It's not a huge amount of latitude, but they're allowed to go ahead and set their own policy on that. But it's very important that they have that. And the fact of the matter, though, is that the Constitution itself says you are not obligated to accept anything but gold or silver coin as a legal tender in payment of debts. Because what the let's go ahead and look at a Federal Reserve bill here. Federal Reserve note. Yeah, there we go. A Federal Reserve bill, also known as a Federal Reserve note or dollar bill, is a paper banknote used in the United States. Okay, so fun facts about the Federal Reserve note. This is not a dollar. This does not even remotely resemble a dollar. That is the fact of the matter. It claims to be $1. That is a lie. I'll show you what it actually is. Federal Reserve note. If you've ever played, what is it, the game of Monopoly, I'm trying to think, where you have promissory notes, that's what the note in Federal Reserve note stands for. Promissory note is an IOU. You could literally take off everything else on here and just say the Federal Reserve is issuing you write it in crayon, make it just for effect, just to show you what this thing actually is. Take an ordinary kid's piece of craft paper and say Federal Reserve, I owe you $1. And then it's signed by the kid who never actually pays you back. Right? It's just a promise. That's what the promissory note stands for. It's a promise. This is a promise. It is not real money. Okay? And if somebody tries to force you to accept one or any number of these in lieu of actual money, you have every right to demand actual money. You are not obligated to accept this. This is not money. Sorry, I think there's a reverse side of the bill somewhere. But, oh yeah, and the bill. Bill stands for Bill of Credit, which is, again, just like they're saying we owe you. You know, you have become the government's creditor, right? And the thing about an IOU or a promissory note is it's only as good as the promise of the issuing party. What are the promises of the Federal Reserve worth? Let's find out. We have this inflation calculator. Here's one I like better. Give me a second. I like this one, the usinflationcalculator.com. So, what this does is it allows you to ask the question of if in a certain year you were to buy something for some dollar amount, then in 2025, or whatever year you decide to put in, that same item would cost this amount of money. Assuming that the pricing relative to all other commodities of that item had not changed one bit. Just saying dollar for dollar. 1913 to the present, this would be the effective inflation rate. And one of the ways I like to conceptualize this is I would say, let's say my great-great-grandparents put $100 into a savings account. Then, in 2025, $100 would in theory have the same value as $3,200. Oh. But, okay, here's the thing. Let's say they just stuffed it under a mattress. Let's say you actually found that $100 bill from 1913. Now, disregarding any collector's item value that it might have, just the face value of the bill, that $100 bill would have less than, or approximately, shall we say, 3%. It would have retained about 3% of its purchasing power. That is, if it had been spent in 1913, it could buy $100 worth of stuff. But today, it could only buy about $3 worth of stuff relative to what it. Maybe I'm not explaining this very well, but yeah. So the effective inflation rate since the Federal Reserve began is over $3,000, and that's terrifying because yeah, if they had put $100 in savings, it's worth $3 today, right? Relative purchasing power. And if your parents had put money into the bank in 1970, said, "Oh, we're going to go ahead and put $100 into the bank," I'm sorry, but it's only worth about $16 today. And the dollar amount has stayed the same. The $100 bill still worth $100 in theory. It's just that the government printed 30 times that much money out of thin air and just spent it on whatever they wanted, gave it to whoever they wanted, bailed out whatever banks they wanted, whatever corporations they wanted. And there's no accounting for it, as far as I'm aware. Like in the general sense, there's no, like, we don't have receipts from the Federal Reserve. We don't know where all this money went. We don't even know how much they printed. This is just how much we've been able to figure out, roughly, that has been disclosed, if you will, that they've printed. This is one of the problems with fiat currency. So, like, the federal government has literally stolen, like, 97% of all privately held wealth since 1913. And this is one of the problems. Inflation is theft. Categorically, inflation is theft. Because it robs people of the value of all of their held monetary assets. It literally steals, it robs that purchasing power from them. The government gives it to whoever they want. So yeah, not a great investment. And I hear people saying, well, you go to invest it and stuff. And I say, you know what? I'm not going to name call you, but that's dumb. That's dumb. Just, sorry, I'm in a little bit of irritated here, but don't fall for that, please. Because, of course, we should be able to invest our money. And if we have a 5% rate of return, then we should get a 5% rate of return, not a 2%, because inflation last year was 3% or whatever, not a negative 1% because inflation last year was 6%. Your money shouldn't lose value over time. Preservation of value is an intrinsic attribute of all worthwhile currency. Therefore, fiat currency is not worthwhile by that attribute itself, in addition to the fact that it doesn't have intrinsic value. Anyways, just a little bit of fiddling around there with the numbers. If you run the numbers also, this is one of the reasons why Social Security is a scam. Even if you thought it was okay for the government to manage and even force you to have a retirement account that is supposedly going to pay you back for, during your working life, which is likely to be 45, 50 years, possibly more at this point, given the cost of living, probably significantly more actually. But even just going back in time to your, parents or grandparents in the 1970s or whatever, 40 to 50 year working life career, and then, however many couple decades, 3 decades maybe of retirement where they're actually drawing on their Social Security benefit. In that time window, run the numbers on the compounding inflation because it's exponential, right? And you will find that the government literally spent like half of your savings or more during the time between when you put it into your safe deposit box. It's like if you put gold coins in your safe deposit box, saying, I'm saving up for retirement. I'm being prudent. Look, go me. I'm doing the thing the government schools told me to do, and I'm putting this money into the safe deposit box. And I have saved up. You save up all this amount of money. Let's say you've saved up $2.5 million. But guess what? By the time you actually get around to withdrawing, there's only $1.25 million left. If you had $2 million saved up for retirement, it's only $1 million. If you had $1 million, it's only half a million. Where did the rest of it go? The government literally just stole it and spent it. That's what inflation is. That's what it does. So, and this is part of the reason why, federal income tax withholding is also a terrible idea, because they are literally spending your money. They can invest it, and they can spend it, and they can earn interest on it, while you don't even have it, and you don't have the flexibility. You can't invest it. You can't do anything with it. You can't meet medical bills with it. You can't brush teeth with it. You can't do anything with it. It's gone until, if in their munificence, their generosity, they decide to give you some tax credits, some tax breaks and stuff, then they will give a portion of it back to you after they have inflated also a portion of the value away from it, which is already just an automatic earnings for them. It's just theft, because they're not even giving you, even if they give you a full refund at the end of every year, they've already skimmed a couple of percent away from it in inflation, because it's lost that much value during the time. All right, I think I'm going to wrap up here. But please do, if you would like, in the comments, if you want to join the contest, to try to estimate just how much money our government has indeed stolen from us over time. Go ahead and put your best guess in the comments, and what's your best reasonable lower bound, I guess, if you will, and see how it compares to the total alleged savings from Doge so far, because we've already shown that Social Security annual inputs into that, and you're not even seeing half of that ever again because of inflation, even if they were to give you, in theory, all of it back. Plus, why do we have the unfunded liabilities on top of that? Why are we overpaying there too? Why are we pledging our next 3.5 years of full-time work away just to that? And we can't even survive if we do that, because we have other expenses too. So this is going to take generations to pay off. Generations. Maybe we have gotten so selfish that we just can't even fathom how bad this is. Maybe we're willing to take it because we're like, well, it makes life easier for me because I got a tax break for this, or I got a loan from the government to lower my housing costs or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's making housing costs more expensive for everyone. Have you noticed how life hasn't been getting better for anyone except for the technological breakthroughs? Where's all the money gone? Answer that question for me. Where has all the money gone? Where have the lives of our people gone? What have our lives gone towards? You wouldn't work for your whole life just to have it frittered away by some potentate, would you? You wouldn't inflict that on your children. You wouldn't saddle them with that debt because you thought that socialism was a good idea. But there are generations ahead, generations of misery, that needs to be repaid in full. We're never seeing that money again, right? But we need to know that this has been happening. We need to know that and Elon Musk's been like, oh yeah, Doge, it's just been finding out the tip of the iceberg and stuff. And it's like, yeah, but yeah. So, but we already knew about this. We already knew about money laundering in our government. We already knew about inflation. We already knew about Social Security and Medicare. We already knew about all this. Maybe we didn't know all the specific line items, but that usually doesn't matter as much as, well, what's the bulk of it going towards, and why aren't they telling us? Why have we been okay with being robbed blind for generations? I saw a meme on the internet the other day. It said something like, the American Revolutionary says, 2% tax, revolt, Americans, 67% effective tax rate. Oh yeah, it's fine. you know, it's like, guys. Anyways, I believe the solution is just to say what's true. For starters, get used to saying that 2 plus 2 equals 4, not 5. The latter is inflationary language. So let's not fall for that. I think we're smarter than that. We can be if we choose to be. Things aren't a certain way just because people in government say so. And I understand it's uncomfortable to stand up to people who wear suits and ties. I'm not wearing a full suit, I'm just wearing a white shirt and tie. Says wanting to participate. Anyway, yeah. I hope more people say that 2 plus 2 equals 4. And that's a large part of the reason for this. It's not to be fear-mongering or sow seeds of discontent or anything like that. It's just, let's be real. If you're outraged over the Doge expenditures, then why would you not be outraged over Social Security and Medicare taxes in the first place, and the not full disclosure of their withholdings? Why would you not be upset about inflation? Those are the bigger issues, and we can prove it financially. It's very easy to prove. So let's do a full accounting. If we're not going to be hypocrites in the day of judgment, then we need to actually be able to produce an accounting sheet and be like, oh yeah, these are the biggest evils of my day. Duh, 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 duh. Like, maybe there could be some debate. Is this one bigger evil or is that one bigger? I don't know. There could be some ambiguity there. But at least in matters of let's not confuse, $100 billion of wasted human effort and money and so on with 30 trillion, 70, 80 trillion. Let's not be hypocrites. Am I making sense? Because it's hypocrisy to be up in arms about $100 billion if you're not up in arms about $100 trillion. And this is not about greed at all. This is about human rights. This is about the right of your neighbor and yourself to be able to afford bread, to be able to pay your medical bills, to be able to survive and have dreams and do things with your life. Develop your talents. Help people get the education they want and need. And no, we're not going to be able to just magically afford everything, even if we jettison socialism. Life is hard. But it's better with freedom. It's better when we respect people's rights. It's better when we don't steal and we don't abet theft. I'm fine with our taxpayer dollars going towards building roads and stuff. We need those. We need roads. We need post offices. Go ahead and pay taxes, build post offices and roads. Those are enumerated powers in the Constitution. But yeah, all these money laundering projects, I don't like them. I never did. Yeah, we should fulfill our obligations to our allies, be above board about it. That's not money laundering, as long as it's within the enumerated powers. As long as we have a voice in that transparency, as long as we're well represented and listened to and heard, and heeded. But people being unaccountable and spending your money, that's what leads to death. So these unalienable human rights, life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. How much happiness can you pursue if your liberty is cut in half? If your life is cut in half? If your property is cut in half? This is why these things matter. I understand this might be my most unpopular live stream on this human rights topic, overlapping with the president's words to the nation, but I'll just submit for your consideration. Yeah, it's absolutely disingenuous to claim to care about people's property, about our tax dollars, about spending, etc., if you don't care and I don't want to sound despondent or dejected here. I'm just trying to stir up the spirit of freedom and say, we need people to care. Yes, we should care about the $1. We should care about the widow's mite. Absolutely. We got to care about the big stuff too. Let's not leave that off, right? So, and maybe it's just a feeling of despondency. Maybe it's just a feeling of futility, saying, oh yeah, well, inflation's been going on for so long, who's going to stop them? I'll tell you who could stop them today. If we could change our minds today, if we could change the way we feel about this today, the problem would be solved tomorrow. Power is in our own hands. It always has been. And it's my prayer that we will take advantage of the opportunities we have while we have them. To stand up and say, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Because we believe in the principle of accountability. We believe in agency and accountability. These are eternal principles. Jesus Christ will hold us accountable for this. We need to be able to balance a checkbook. This is an eternal skill. Yeah, we probably won't use money in heaven. But honesty and respect for other people's property, those are things that will pay dividends for eternity. And yeah, thanks so much if you've listened. Thank you for listening. And I hope you will pay it forward with, even if you don't like everything I have to say, I hope you will, at a minimum, like my passion about this. Even if you don't like my politics, like, love the pursuit of freedom. Love your neighbor. Love even your enemy. Don't take from him. Don't steal things, even from the people you don't like. I know that sounds preachy, but this is real life, and these things that get signed into law, they have real consequences. That's how we ended up spending those $100-some-odd billion in the first place, is because we were convinced that it was a good idea, or at least we didn't care, and we didn't speak up to those legislators. Or if we did, power to you. Thank you for standing up for what's right. And they'll be held to account for it in the day of judgment. Anyways, there are so many ills that could indeed be solved if we would understand that there's no way to color things that makes it right to steal other people's property. There's no way to justify socialism or communism. They're the same beast. Socialism is just juvenile communism. And the fundamental principle of communism is theft. Oh, here's something. Okay, I meant to share this at the very beginning of the live stream, but I might not end on it because it's a little bit dark and disturbing, but I'll share it with you. I urge you to remember that the enemy of mankind has promised from the beginning that he would take these assets, money. Remember that the love of money is the root of all evil. Isn't that interesting? There's nothing wrong with owning money. There's nothing wrong with having earned a respectable living. Money, properly speaking, is a token of service. Misappropriated service, misplaced trust is what the devil feeds on. And he uses misplaced trust. So remember, that's what money is. It's a token of trust. It's trust that a person has performed a service to mankind. If we misplace that trust, the devil can use it to go and recruit mercenaries, police forces, armies, nations, empires to go and fight wars of aggression against each other. And that is exactly what we see. So if we want to understand the root of all evil, if we want to understand how to protect people's liberties against evil, if we want to understand how to protect life itself It is indispensable that we understand how the adversary has manipulated the money system to his advantage, how he has beguiled our trust, how he's hoodwinked us. Because that's the battle, that's the war in heaven we're fighting on the earth today. Misplaced trust, misplaced priorities. That's what the devil feeds on. People who don't trust who they should trust, and who trust whom they should not trust. Those are the people who end up being led on to the slaughter by the thousands, by the millions, in pointless wars, attempts at conquest. That's the nature of globalism, global domination plans. That's Satan's intent. And he's using money to do it. Our misplaced trust, unworthy and stolen and manipulated, laundered tokens of trust. And that's pathetic. We should never, ever be so blind as to the real cause and effect. We need to understand who the true servants of mankind are and invest our trust in them. I'll give you one more thing, and then I've got to check out here. But Joseph Smith taught us a principle: how to resist the problems of inflation. I will submit inflation is a horrible, horrible monster. He says in the scriptural teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith that the way to combat this problem, I should probably pull it up for you. Let me bear with me 1 second. There we go. Alrighty, he has a brilliant solution, and I'm just going to read this to you because I absolutely love it. It's taking too long to load. I'm going to go to another site to find it. All right. Go to my. There it is. Going to my X account. Share the screen here. Okay. Ready for this? Okay. Joseph Smith's remarks on immigration, the Constitution, religious freedom, and how to end the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve didn't exist in his day, but fiat currency did. That is, IOUs, printed bills or written bills saying, I owe you this much money. I hope you accept this instead of money. He has the solution to this problem. He says, situated as we are, with a flood of immigration constantly pouring in upon us, I consider that it is not only prudential but absolutely necessary to protect the inhabitants of the city from being imposed upon by a spurious currency. For instance, this is a matter of protection. It's a responsibility. Many of our eastern and old country friends are altogether unacquainted with the situation of the banks in this region of country, and as they generally being specie with them, money of some kind, something used as money, they are perpetually in danger of being gulled by speculators. Remember, I've warned about speculation through cryptocurrency and other things. Besides, there is so much uncertainty in the solvency of the best banks that I think it much safer to go upon the hard money system altogether. He does what you can do. He says that 2 + 2 = 4. Listen to this. Get this. He says, I have examined the Constitution upon this subject and find my doubts removed. The Constitution is not a law, but it empowers the people to make laws. For instance, the Constitution governs the land of Iowa, but it is not a law for the people. The Constitution tells us what shall not be lawful tender. Article 1, Section 10 declares that nothing else except gold and silver shall be lawful tender. This is not saying that gold and silver shall be lawful tender. That is to say, it doesn't obligate you to accept either one. It only provides that the state may make a law to make gold and silver lawful tender. I know of no state in the Union that has passed such a law, and I am sure that Illinois has not. The legislature has ceded up to us the privilege of enacting such laws as are not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States and the state of Illinois. So interestingly, he's talking about a municipal government here. He's talking about the city of Nauvoo. They have privilege of enacting laws for themselves, consistent with the constitutions. And we stand in the same relation to the state as the state does to the union. This right here, by the way, is vital to understanding federalism. If you want to understand that, that's in several of the bills that have been addressed this legislative session in Utah and around the nation, actually. There are a lot of poison pills about federalism. Better learn what it really is. We stand in the same relation to the state as the state does to the union. The clause referred to in the Constitution is for the legislature. It is not a law for the people. The different states and even Congress itself have passed many laws diametrically contrary to the Constitution of the United States. Yeah, this should not surprise you. This is 1800 something, early 1800s, already making tons of unconstitutional laws. The state of Illinois has passed a state law making property a lawful tender for the payment of debts. I believe this refers to like land property. And if we have no law on the subject, we must be governed by it. Shall we be such fools as to be governed by its laws, which are unconstitutional? No. We will make a law for gold and silver, and then the state law ceases and we can collect our debts. Powers not delegated to the states or reserved from the states are constitutional. Again, understand federalism, the true meaning of it. The Constitution acknowledges that the people have all power, not reserved to itself. I am a lawyer. I am a big lawyer, and comprehend heaven, earth, and hell, to bring forth knowledge that shall cover up all lawyers, doctors, and other big bodies. This is the doctrine of the Constitution, so help me God. The Constitution is not law to us, but it makes provision for us whereby we can make laws. Where it provides that no one shall be hindered from worshiping God according to his own conscience is a law. No legislature can enact a law to prohibit it. The Constitution provides to regulate bodies of men and not individuals. So there you have it. There is the solution to ending the control that the Federal Reserve might attempt to exercise over you. Simply exercise your true federalism, your true individual and municipal sovereignties. You can have your own municipality pass a law that says this is what we'll accept. And you don't have to accept any funny money. No fake money. No inflation for you. You can solve that problem yourself. You don't have to wait for the federal government to do it. All right. My time is short. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Good night.